Hey, Sarah.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well.
Good.
All right, we're good to go. As long as we stay on here.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And anybody need the minutes read from last meeting? I say my suggestion would be dispense with the reading of the minutes since our connections have not been very secure here lately and are very reliable before we get knocked off. So, everybody good with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good skipping it.
Okay. So the main, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, then I sent out the email about asking the council, hold the council to find out their desire on the discussion of the occupancy limits. And so they said that they wanted the planning commission to discuss that further, come up with a recommendation. And so I sent out a couple of things, a link, a document, and then thanks, Kevin, for sending that one from Caroline County. That was good information also. And what we can do is we can pop those up on the screen, or try to anyway, as we go through this discussion. Sarah, were you on the planning commission when we discussed this before?
Yeah. It was because there was gentleman from the Baltimore area was bringing people in to work at the poultry plant, and it was just there were like a high level of people that were living in one house, and that was cause for concern. Am I right?
Right. We actually had several. Okay. It was several different residences around town that were rental properties, and to catch Kevin up to speed here, and there would be one person that would rent this, and then they would bring in individuals from outside of the area to work at the some were at the poultry facilities. I think some others were elsewhere, and but what they were doing, they would rent out. They would put the lease in their name, and then they would sublet to a whole lot of people.
Right.
And we had one of our police officers ended up at one of the properties, and that's how we kind of got onto this. And the same week that he did that, we had two other properties pop up. The one that the police officer had gone to everybody had already moved in. They had partitioned off the basement with like foam board insulation and made kind of, just sleeping areas for them. And there were wires hanging down, things that were completely in violation. So then we started getting kind of reports from elsewhere around town on different things, same type of situations, or so they seemed. And so we contacted the property owners and told them what was going on with this scenario. And so they actually kind of halted the progress of the move-ins that were getting ready to happen within an hour of when we had called them. And so they curbed, that. There was one that I had in the orchards, and I did some investigation into that, and they were found no violations with that. Everything we could tell, everybody was related, and they actually had bedrooms for everybody because the basement was finished in that dwelling. So you get kind of reports all over the place, and have to look at each one of them case by case to see if they do violate any of the current zoning ordinances. But once that happened, and part of what it was when you're looking at, I think, and do you all remember where I had told you that a lot of these individuals were coming from? It was someplace in Africa that they were coming, that they had come to the U.S. from, looking for employment. And you see it in a lot of different cultures, the naming norms, how family names get carried on. And so a husband and wife may have different last names, but they are married just because of the cultural naming norms. So sometimes it's very difficult under our ordinance when you have a single family residence. It says for a family is defined in the land development regulations. So sometimes it's kind of hard for us just looking at names to determine if everyone's related or not. And if you would happen to have a group of individuals who were trying to skirt the regulations, they could say that they're related. We had addressed an issue on Sharon Street at one time where they weren't related, and it was they were just using that house to board people. I think the idea behind occupancy limits, some kind of ordinance with occupancy limits, is that you could, it gives you another enforcement mechanism to prevent overcrowding of structures. I talked to the county about it, and my understanding is that occupancy limits that the county enforces through the building code only apply to commercial structures, and they don't apply to the residential dwellings. So it doesn't, the building code doesn't really help us too much on that end. But it's also the flip side. If you implement an ordinance, you can't prevent family members from living together, even if they would be over, if you say you took like Caroline County or Winchester's ordinance and slapped it on Timberville, it wouldn't prevent family members from living together because they are family members. So it's a lot to digest. It's a lot to think about. And I know Carl had some good thoughts on this when we talked about it before, so I wish he was on here. And if I remember, he saw some issues that could arise from implementing an ordinance like this. So I don't know exactly what the best way to do it would be. We would still have to validate the number of, if they're related in some fashion, if you get too many people in there, whereas they could just say that they're related. So no matter which way it's done, I think all the situations have their challenges.
I didn't realize that when I sent that out, that Caroline County actually mirrors Winchester.
Yeah.
I looked at it closer, and I was actually kind of surprised by that. But again, it's not something that I've ever had to look at before. I mean, I've dealt with building as far as like loading capacities and stuff like that for a number in a commercial way, but this is entirely different. And what surprises me is that it's not out there as much as I would have thought. It's like it's not common. And I think that what I've learned since this has come out is that it's almost like a slippery slope too. And and I probably I've already figured out where those challenges are, based off of news reports and complaints that I've read about.
Right.
But again, I don't think that should be a deterrent, though, as to try to pursue something. I mean, I'm just kind of voicing what I've learned about it. And I reached out to the town manager of Luray. I'm actually really good friends with him. I'm personal friends with him. And asked about how they do this, how they've approached it. And basically, and I wrote some notes down. So Luray doesn't actually have an ordinance, so to speak, about the restrictions on occupancy, but they go off of using the definition of a dwelling. And that's what they go off of. They basically are defining as a single family, a residential dwelling unit designed for and occupied by one family, including a modular unit with sectional homes to differentiate from apartments. So basically that's what they use. And he said, luckily they've only had one issue. So that's what they do. And that may be something we consider, because I'm looking at size, I think that probably you're going to get a lot of kickback from folks who believe that we are trying to use bigger areas, city like Fairfax County, Winchester, and they're like, well, why should we fall under that same umbrella? Well, that has to be addressed, but I think that there's more than one avenue, and maybe a definition of something that we can sort of, without making people feel like that they are being encroached on as far as government telling me who can and cannot live in my house. So that may be one strategy that we could look at. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the other thing that came up in the conversation before was, there are plenty of places around town where you might have two friends who are living together because it's just cheaper for them to rent a house together as opposed to separate. But under our, if they're renting a house, technically they would be in violation of our land development regulations because they're not a family. But it's, common sense. It doesn't make any sense using common sense to restrict somebody from doing that, because, they could be the quietest people in the town, and you would be restricting them just because of the language of the land development regulations. And so it falls into that area of the authority to enforce the ordinance and whether you choose to enforce the ordinance or not. So.
Well, but which one was that? I read it several days ago. Now I forget. But they went by the number of people and the square footage.
That's for Caroline counties and Winchester's, I believe. I believe both of them do that.
Okay.
And then they also, Winchester's. I think there was multiple different ways that they would do that based on square footage, size of the bedrooms, and for every additional person you had to have so many square feet in the bedroom, things like that. So
right.
You get into kind of a big snowball of formulas to try to figure out who qualifies to live in which structure and things like that. And the town attorney he had sent an email and said that the city of Harrisonburg has an ordinance in place that he said, in some fashion to address the number of JMU students in dwellings. The only thing I could find when I searched Harrisonburg's code on the Municode site was geared more towards commercial dwellings or commercial structures. So I don't know. I asked Mark if he could find that code section and send to me, but I haven't heard anything back from him quite yet. So when I do, if he gets something back to me, or if he can confirm that it is just for the that it only applies to commercial structures, that doesn't really help us any, because you have the building code that you can use in that instance for the commercial structure application.
Well, and I mean, I would like to have something, because in R1 we're protected, but the other areas aren't protected.
Hey, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, that's fine.
I just wanted to jump in real quick before we switch gears too quick, that I had did an internal search, because I worked for the city of Harrisonburg, went on community development and looked in that area to see where I could find anything. And I didn't actually talk to Jeff Fletcher or any of those folks, but I didn't find anything for residential at all. And if JMU, we would not carry JMU's ordinances within our own regulations that I could see. I don't know where that will be, but as far as like just general residential within the city of Harrisonburg, excluding JMU, I could not find it.
Okay. Sure. want to jump back. Sharon, you said something about in R1 you're protected. Can you explain what you mean by that? I'm not
Well,
sure I follow
because
you
in
on
R1, it's single family dwellings
that.
and it's just families, single family dwellings.
Right.
So you could have members of your family living with you, but you can't be renting out rooms.
Right. You can't rent out rooms. Right.
Right. And that's what was happening on our street.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They were renting out rooms.
Yeah. And then you get into R3 zoning, and that allows for multifamily.
That's right.
Yeah, I think the whole thing that, the reason this was brought up was because of how many people were trying to be forced into, say a basement or an area that maybe wasn't suited to be habitable, or they weren't set up to be habitable.
Right.
We want everybody that comes to Timberville to be comfortable and have a welcome and have a good situation where they live. And so it's very difficult to because the individuals that were living in this in the original house where the police officer went to, they had no idea they were in violation. They just thought they were renting rooms,
Right.
and didn't know that there was any violation going on. So it's it's kind of a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword because you're trying to protect those individuals by creating areas or setting requirements of decent living conditions. But when you enforce that, then you might misplace people or displace people, I should say, because then they don't have a place to live. And I believe a lot of these individuals had come in from Maryland to find gainful employment here. And so then they would have to go back to Maryland, or if they had a place to go back to in Maryland. So it's a lot of, it's lots of different, it's not very cut and dry on what the best option is.
Well, and I think part of the problem too is that you were saying that this person rented out the house and then basically subletted it. So it's a problem also with communication with landlords to make sure that they follow up to make, so there's what the town can do, but then there's also what the property owner needs to be responsible for as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure how we can communicate that with the property owners and also be fair to the people who are coming into the area and make sure that they are well provided for in terms of, basic living conditions.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We had two of the property owners that where no one had moved in yet. They were actually supposed to move in that day. And they jumped on it right away because they could kind of see the issues that might arise by having that situation on their property. But the thing is, if you get and I guess that's where this comes into play and where the enforcement of this would be the most practical, is if you have a property owner who doesn't have the highest moral standards or ethics that would market their properties to these types of situations where they try to get as many people that, if all they're looking for is the money, then they don't really care.
Right. And we don't want to have slums popping up. Like, definitely that's not good for any party involved.
Right. So I don't know what else to add to this. We keep talking about it. I'm not trying to end the conversation, but I don't really have any more to add.
Well, and I'll be honest, I've had a sick dog since Sunday who just had like emergency surgery this afternoon. So I haven't read it as closely focused on it as much as I would like before making any kind of suggestion or moving on. So I personally would like some more time, and then also to read what other municipalities have done of similar size, so I can kind of like what we did with the Airbnb ordinance that we worked on personally. So
And we need to, and then we need to, I don't think that ever came to final resolution either.
No, I don't think it did because then COVID hit.
Right. And so we need to, I had that on my list of things to bring up tonight. So anyway, what I would like to do is try calling around and contacting find out some of the other localities that have these ordinances in place or something similar, and find out how it works for them, how their enforcement goes, maybe what percentage of their dwelling units in town this would apply to, type thing. And maybe Mark will get back to me with some information on if he can find something for me for Harrisonburg, or maybe it was like you were saying, Kevin, maybe it was like specific to JMU housing, on campus housing. I'm not sure.
Right. And I can look further into that. I can reach out to the director at community development and see, just as a cross check.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. So are there other questions that you all think we should be asking as we go through this process? Like,
I right now don't even know which questions to ask yet until I read some more.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm like kind of hit a wall, and it's like, okay,
yeah.
There are these examples of these ordinances out there, but how do we make them? How do we apply them in Timberville, and to what extent? So yeah, there's I think there's a fair amount of work to be done on this yet, at least for
I think, I want to be a welcoming town, but I don't want people like that being taken advantage of. And then I don't want it to be disadvantage to the neighbors. So yeah, check with some other localities and let's just go from there.
Yeah, and I know Pilgrims, their HR department, I spoke to Graham down at Pilgrims on the day that this was going on. And so he got the HR department involved immediately, and they're very involved in this, and very close to it, obviously, because it affects their employees. It doesn't do them any good to hire individuals who are falling into these situations, of these housing situations.
Right.
And then if they have to move, well, then Pilgrim's just lost an employee. So it would create turnover for them. And Graham speaks very highly of some of the individuals that were caught in these situations.
Sure.
And he was telling me that I want to say in Moorfield, they came to an agreement with, or had some kind of contract that they worked out with one of the property owners there, who owned like a larger housing development. And I think they might have had apartments and different things. And if I remember correctly, the way Graham explained it to me, Pilgrims would sign a contract with them and pay the rent on these properties, however many apartments they wanted to rent, and they would pay it whether it was occupied or not, but they could move families into them. And they were and Pilgrims monitored all of that, and they moved in, they would move a single family into these apartments. And they always had, because of the contract, they always had places to move their employees into, which is a very cool arrangement that they had. And very, it's just very forward thinking, in my opinion. But
sure.
I think Pilgrims may have reached out to some of the local, some of the owners of the larger local housing developments, and I don't think they could ever come to an agreement, or they could never get interest from the property owners to enter into that kind of agreement, if I remember the way that it was explained to me.
Yeah.
But we'll do some more checking on that. I'll make calls, and as we get the information in, if you're all making calls and looking at this stuff and you've run across something interesting, shoot it out in an email to everybody else. I have to do that, otherwise I forget what I was doing. So that's just the way that I keep things. Instead of having a whiteboard, I put an email. So anything else on the occupancy limits right now?
No, I don't have any of that.
The other thing Sarah mentioned was the Airbnb ordinance, and I didn't send anything out on that. I thought about it after I'd sent the memo out to you all earlier, but yesterday, I guess it was. So what I'll do is I'll get all that information back together and I'll shoot it out to you all in an email and try to bring you up to speed on, I'll try to figure out where we were at in that process, and then bring everybody else up to speed. And Kevin, this is kind of a, there's been a lot of discussion with Airbnbs and short-term rentals, and you probably heard some of it through City of Harrisburg. They went through those ordinances probably a year and a half or so ago, something like that, maybe. So it's something that we were looking at here, especially with as quickly as things are evolving as far as the short-term rentals, the Airbnb and those types of sites go. We wanted to make sure Timberville was covered in what we could allow to happen as property owners, might have been interested in this. So it's something that we'll get back on, bring that one back to the forefront of the discussion, and I'll get that information back out to you all to start looking at and get back up to speed on that. Next thing I had on my list, I think it was at the last planning commission meeting, somebody asked about the house on Montevideo Street. Is that right?
Yeah, it wasn't last month, it was the month before.
Okay.
Yeah, I asked because I had run past it and like the tree had fallen down and there was, yeah.
So I got in touch with the property owner, and on the day that I called, she said it was kind of weird because she was waiting on quotes from, she's trying to get 3 different estimates from contractors to demolish the house. So I told her, I said, just, and that was this week when I talked to her. So I said, just as soon as you get those quotes back, let me know, or call me so that we can discuss it. And hopefully she'll have a time frame of when they're going to do it. What they're going to do is they're going to raise that house, and then they want to build a new house back. I think her daughter's going to live there. She wanted to keep the property in her family. So they want to raise that house and then build a new house back for her daughter to live in.
Good.
So,
Okay.
Good.
yeah, so that would be good.
You were going to
building,
meet with people for the Christ building, right? You were getting ready to, okay.
I met with representatives from EPA and DEQ, and I've also been in discussions with the county building official, and they've given me some real good support, some real good ideas, and they're there to guide us through this process. Ms. Saker was she had a contractor who was supposed to be, she thought was going to fix the building up. So I called the contractor and he said he backed out. And I contacted Mrs. Saker and asked her if she had any other potential leads for contractors, and she said no. So at this point, we're just proceeding. And the reason that we'd given her that second chance, or that another opportunity to at least bring a proposal back to us, whether the council would have accepted it or not, it's going to be very expensive, extremely expensive to have this building taken down. And Kevin, this is the building at the corner of Main Street, North Main and Church Street.
I did actually pay attention actually after we brought it to my attention, I went and actually saw it, and I was surprised.
Yeah. So EPA, the representative from the EPA said that the EPA likes for the property owner to have their contractor clean up any hazardous materials because it's just cheaper. If the EPA can come in and do it, but it's considerably more expensive if that's the case. So the representative for the EPA said that he could provide oversight on at the process. I asked the building official, county building official, what he would need. It's kind of this catch-22 because the materials, any hazardous materials need to come out of the building before demolition can begin, but you can't get into it because it's not safe to enter. So my head was kind of spinning. I'm like, how do you do this? And so that's where we got everybody on the together in a conversation. Joe up at the county said he had I think he spoke with the contractor that Mrs. Saker was going to use. But anyway, Joe was talking about, he thinks that you can take down part of the, kind of take down the upper levels of the walls to where you get in safely and access some of the material, remove that hazardous material, and then take more down and kind of work your way in and remove the materials as you go. So I am in the process of getting quotes from contractors who can do this work, and with guidance from the EPA and DEQ on what I need to look for in the contractors. And Kevin, if you know of anybody that you want to recommend, just shoot me an email with their information of anybody that does this work. I've got a couple of local ones, but the more I can get, the better feel I have for what we're looking at in budget wise.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's unfortunate that there was a really good demo contractor when I was living in South Central Virginia, SB Cox. They're really good, and they were really, really reasonable. But unfortunately, I don't think they come this far. But they're out. I'll certainly see what I can do.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that.
And AC, are you saying that there is no way the town can force her to pay for this?
Well, what will happen is if the town has to demolish it, the town will put liens on the property.
Right.
And I think and I don't remember for sure, it seems like Mark said that we could, and I think it may be in the ordinance that was passed already, blighting the property, that any liens can be placed against any property that has, because it's not in her name, it's in the LLC's name. And so any property that has that name attached to it can, a lien could be placed on, because the cost of demolition and cleanup for this property, there's no way that we can recoup our cost by selling that property when it's over with. So, and it could drag out because there are certain ways that she can pay for it that could take a long time to reimburse the town to retain the property. But obviously, when we get to that point, that's when we get Mark involved further to give us guidance on how we take care of that.
And you said that you met with the EPA and the county. The DEQ wasn't involved in that meeting.
I met with EPA and DEQ on a Zoom call, and then I had Joe couldn't make it into that Zoom call. He actually double booked, so I brought him up to speed and talked to him the next couple of days later.
Okay. Well, I'm going to just put then you talked to all three of them.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And we have a real good email chain going on with amongst the four of us. So everybody's working really well together.
Good.
It's good to have that support, because obviously we've never tackled anything like this before. We've done some houses and some smaller things, but this is with the hazardous material and stuff, it's a slightly different beast.
Well, we do have to get it taken care of, because this spring will be 3 years.
3 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're pushing hard on this one. So as soon as I get the quotes back, and Sharon, when we have our budget meeting next week, that's one of the things we're going to talk about is the budget amendment to cover, whatever council decides to do as far as projects mid-year and for stuff that we already have taken care of. And so I want to try to have these quotes back before our budget meeting, so that when we talk about the budget amendment, we can include all of this in that.
Okay.
AC, what is that address for that building? Do you have it?
I think it's 157 North Main Street, I believe is what it is.
157 North Main.
Okay. Any questions on any of that?
I don't think so.
Okay. And another interesting thing, I received a call today from a contractor asking about demolition permits for a house on Church Street. So I don't know.
That's news to me.
Yeah. Well, they gave me your address, Sarah. No.
Oh, yeah. After I just invested all this money in making it doing all the things we've waited 11 years to do.
Well, they said they were going to tear your kitchen counters up. So.
No.
But no, so I drove up
No,
Church
I
Street
hadn't-
today. Yeah, I drove up Church Street today and I'm like, what house? Because they're talking about tearing down a house and putting another house in. I'm like, so I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where it would be. The only thing I can think is if it's one of the houses down below you,
Yeah.
like
Well,
Mr.
but I
Post.
know, so there's, yeah, it's like, I know like, so there's the empty farmhouse that he
Mhm.
owns, but then there's his house, and he's still in that. And
Right,
so, yeah, the
So-
only house that is empty that I know of is the one right down here.
Right. So I don't know. I asked it was actually the contractor's wife who called and said that that was asking about any demolition permits or anything. And I asked her what the address was, and she said, I don't know. She said he just called me and told me he was on his way to Timberville to look at a job. Like it was that quick. And I asked her, I said, well, when you find out the address and anything, I said, can you shoot it over to me, please? Or just, if nothing else, out of curiosity. So,
Well, we did have a lot of traffic up our lane today, so I don't know if that, like, Brad and I were like, what the heck is going on? Like, we had a van, just like a white work van drive through, so I don't know, because of the way the entrances to our lanes are. So
Right.
it may be next door.
maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's
Interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. So, but anyway, that's all that I had on my list. Do you have any questions about anything going on in town?
No.
So you had alluded to something about one of the lots next to the town office that something was possibly coming in.
Right.
Have you found out any more about that or share any more information?
I haven't heard anything more since that last conversation I had with the gentleman. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. All I know is that it's retail. They told me that it's a retail, and it's 23 to 2,500 square feet. I think is what they were talking about. What the size of the building would be that they would be putting in. So.
Maybe it's another auto place, auto supply place.
I don't know. I think they're a little bit bigger than that. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the plan is for that. It does sound like, I think the mayor on one of his daily walks stopped and saw the current tenant down there and asked him about, kind of was asking him about it. He confirmed that, yeah, he would be moving out in a certain number of months. So it's just a matter of waiting to hear for the plans to come across the desk here. So. Any other questions? Any concerns anybody has to bring up?
No.
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 Nope.
Okay.
Nope, I'm good.
All righty. Well, if nobody has anything more, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting, and we'll see y'all next month, and we'll start circulating information on all these different topics. So
Thank you. And tell Maggie I said hi.
I will do that.
I hope she gets better and better and better.
Yeah.
Everybody stay safe.
You do
All
the
right.
same. Thank you.
Thank you all.